It's our 2023 launch overview webinar. And before we get into the detail, I just wanted to run some housekeeping for everyone's benefit. If you have any issues with the audio, you can access through the phone and the details are there. We've got the chat function open throughout the meeting. Please ask questions and make comments as we go along. We have allowed plenty of time at the end for a Q&A, so be very happy to take your questions, clarifications, or comments or input to that. So please do so as we go along. We are recording the webinar, so hopefully that's okay with you. It will be on the ENA YouTube channel, and then the slides from the webinar are going to be available at the ENA website. I believe Emily has also just put in the launch document, which is on the ENA website, on the Open Networks website, so that's on the chat. If you haven't seen that, if you want to have a quick look. And there's also more detail on 2023 program again at the Open Networks website. The email to contact Open Networks is opennetworks@energynetworks.org, and the ENA team that is running the project is here and very, very happy to get your feedback. My name is Sotiris Georgiopoulos. I work for UK Power Networks, but I'm also the chair of the Open Networks program, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. Let's have a look at the agenda. My bit is at the beginning just to welcome you, run the housekeeping, and give you an overview of the agenda that I'm just about to do. We've got Andrew Lever with us, who is the Director of Energy Transition of the Carbon Trust. Andrew will give us a bit of an overview to get us going in terms of the bigger picture on flexibility. And then I will take back the mic to cover how Open Networks is delivering value to customers and give you some of the highlights of why this year is different, what are we doing different, what have we changed, and what are our key outputs and outcomes, what benefits we're actually going to deliver for networks customers. We've got Maxine Ferg with us. That Maxine is the independent chair of the Open Networks Challenge Group. So Maxine will also talk from her perspective in terms of provide feedback in terms of Open Networks. And we've got Avi as well, who is the head of Open Networks at ENA. We'll talk a little bit about the governance. And then, as I said, we've allowed time for Q&A. It's 15 minutes at the end. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit more. So, without any further delay, let's get going. And first on Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Sotiris, and yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to say I've got a few short words around flexibility in the bigger picture. For those that don't know the Carbon Trust, we're mission-driven, and that mission is to accelerate the move to a decarbonised future. So we use our innovation policy expertise, we use our impartiality, and that mission-driven status to accelerate system transitions at speed and scale across both public and private sector stakeholders. So, I mean, flexibility, many of on the call, of course, will understand and understand the importance this, of course, plays already within our system, but increasingly, of course, looking towards the future. It, of course, plays a much bigger role. And I guess I just wanted to take a little bit of time just to share a few of the kind of key headlines and insights that we derived from the work a couple of years ago now on flexibility in Great Britain. It was a report that focused on understanding the role and value of flexibility in a net zero 2050 energy system. A little bit more detail, we took a scenario-based approach to try and set out 3 different 2050 scenarios and futures. And these were primarily driven by heat decarbonisation strategies, be that through electric heating, hydrogen heating, or indeed taking in a hybrid kind of heat pump approach. We chose those as we felt that heat decarbonisation was was found to give one of the kind of greatest uncertainties, but also potentially the kind of biggest impact of how our energy system is shaped and formed. Of course, in reality, decarbonisation is likely to consist of a mixture of technologies, and we felt that by kind of twisting and pushing and pulling those scenarios, looking at those extremes around heating technology, it would kind of really highlight the role and value of flexibility alongside those heating approaches, and gave us greater understanding around the types of flexibility in terms of the technologies required and how those interact with demand to ultimately deliver wider system cost reduction. So what you see here on the slide are a kind of five of the kind of main insights and findings. And I guess the first point here to say is that our system in 2050 is significantly larger than that one that we have in Great Britain today, and in particular when flexibility is not deployed. Across those heating scenarios that I mentioned, we saw that up to kind of 3 times as much electricity was required, relative to today's figures. That's kind of over 800 terawatt hours, which is a substantial increase. Of course, what that means is that network build out is also quite significant. That's driven by an increase in peak demand on the network, potentially up to over 200 gigawatts in that electric heating scenario, and flexibility, of course, which a lot of that will be present in the distribution network, needs sufficient capacity itself to be able to charge up and discharge in response to system needs. So investment in networks, of course, is important to unlock that flexibility, such that we can deliver those wider system benefits. Of course, the main kind of headline from the report was the savings that we can take and make within a net zero scenario by deploying flexibility. And we saw those between 10 and 17 billion pounds per year in 2050. Those were recently cited by the Skidmore report as well. And across the range of scenarios that we looked at, of course, flexibility always delivers that to support that kind of cost-effective decarbonisation of the system. Those savings predominantly came from, of course, avoiding generation build-out, both from a CapEx and an OpEx perspective, reducing relying on carbon-negative technologies, and indeed, of course, reducing kind of network reinforcement. So, in terms of again, what do we mean by flexibility and what's included within that? Key insight, of course, is that we need a portfolio, and including on the demand side, across the energy system as a kind of effective strategy to manage uncertainties and reduce costs. So, delivering flexibility from multiple sources allows kind of any impact of price or technology availability to be minimised. And so we find a kind of variety of sources being deployed across all of the heating scenarios to minimise system costs, rather than a few silver bullets and a few dominant ones kind of giving their individual value. And just as an example of that, the demand side response, of course, and flexibility across domestic, non-domestic electric vehicles that were not deployed and were not made available as a flexible resource, added an extra £5 billion onto the cost of meeting demand in that electricity heating scenario in 2050. So it just kind of shows you the magnitude and the scale of what indeed the importance of demand side flexibility as well. And related to that point, I guess the next point around kind of embedding flexibility in those zero carbon heat and transport solutions helps to reduce the system impact, of course, and the costs of making that decarbonisation more economically feasible. So having smart charging, vehicle to grid, allows large-scale EV charging to be delivered, aligning it to renewable generation, reducing the impact on the network through peak demand reduction, and similarly having large-scale deployment of thermal storage allows heat demand to be made more flexible as well. And indeed, we found that, of course, coordinating even amongst these interactions across heating and EV charging kind of further helps to reduce the system cost, kind of highlighting the importance, of course, of those coordination between different flexible sources and indeed across different kind of energy vectors as well. And maybe the last point to kind of just touch on is that unsurprisingly, a large portion of this flexibility across those scenarios sits at a local level and a kind of distributed level close to demand. And analysing, of course, the benefits that brings to deploying. We did this across the whole of the Great Britain, across different regions. It suggests that this is significant value is returned back to those regions through savings in kind of local distribution network infrastructure and operation. Now, whilst those were material, and we took an example just looking at the area of London, which we reckoned we could save about £500 million a year by unlocking that local flexibility. Actually, we found that closer to £1 billion a year was made available to the wider system, and just kind of highlights the materiality of taking a kind of system-wide approach and recognizing the system-wide value that flexibility, albeit that is installed locally, can make to the wider system. So just a few points there. I'll hand back to Soterios, but yeah, we are, of course, we're moving into a system where flexibility even becomes more important, and it is at the heart of that, keeping investment kind of efficient and ultimately kind of minimizing kind of cost to consumers. So I hope that's given us and put us in the frame of mind to talk about the open networks. But back to you, Soterios.
Thank you, Andrew. And I should have said that Andrew, Maxine, and Navi will join me on the Q&A. So if you have any comments or questions for what Andrew just covered there, please feel free to use the chat. And the reason that we ask Andrew to give us these opening remarks is because Open Networks is very much focused on how practically we can use flexibility at distribution networks in a coordinated manner across the whole system to deliver the benefits. So if we move on, and I'll give you an overview in terms of what's in store for 2023. Before I do that, I'll just introduce Energy Networks Association, which is the industry body for electricity and gas networks. So as you can see, gas transmission distribution on the lower part, electricity transmission distribution on the upper part of that diagram. And certainly in open networks, we have all the electricity network operators across transmission and distribution, including ESB networks and Northern Ireland electricity networks and the ESO, and then get working all together really to push forward this program of work. A little bit about not so much the history, but the context of open networks. If we move to the next slide. In 2022, Open Networks marked its 5th year. It was originally conceived in about 2016, 2017 as really the main industry change program for transmission distribution coordination, and it has evolved over time into what we have now in 2023. Over the probably the last 5 years, it's covered a wide range of activities, whether that's linked to flexibility, whether it has to do with planning of the networks or connections for that matter, or for example, in last year's program, we had things such as local area energy planning and looking at some of these whole system activities. We have changed the focus of the program based on feedback of what we received, and I will come back to that. But we've also changed the governance of the project. So we've been introduced last year the Open Networks Challenge Group to provide input on the program, the priorities, and also give us some critique in terms of how we can deliver for customers and consumers more effectively. The Open Networks Challenge Group is a 20 expert, independent, strong body, and Maxine will cover its function and its view really of the program after me. So last year we kind of regrouped and thought, okay, so how are we going to take forward the work we've done in the most effective way, and we ran our annual consultation in summer 2022. And some of the feedback that we received, it's outlined on the slide, but kind of in general terms, there was strong support for the program, and if anything, the push was to make sure that we deliver and we implement the recommendations. So one of the key things that we got back was, yes, it's good to make recommendations, it's good to do this collective work and give us a way forward, but we need to be able to see on the ground the benefits from the implementation as quicker than we currently do. And I think we all recognize that, and we all agree that we've got to be moving faster. So in recognition of that, what we decided to do this year, and getting all the feedback, we had the stakeholder consultation process. Obviously, we've been speaking to some of you and lots of stakeholders on a bilateral basis, and of course we have the challenge group. So what we decided to do is to focus on a smaller number of what we call the big ticket areas, rather than have a wider range, and make sure that we deliver outcomes across those areas. That has also led in some of the reorganization of some of the work at ENA. So the connections work, for example, which we all know grid connections is a critical part of enabling a net zero, is now covered by ENA strategic connections work, which was set up and is now well up and running, was set up sort of September, October last year. So anything that has to do with connections has gone there. And in a similar vein, the whole systems work is covered by ENA's whole systems board. So if we go on to the next slide, the way we've organized our work this year, we said, okay, our focus for this year was to make sure that we make a flexibility markets and distribution network easier to participate, more transparent, and more coordinated with national markets. And I think that's really what we are aiming to deliver. And if we go to the next slide, we've set out a set of activities which are and work streams, for the lack of better description, which are the tabs in orange. So standardized products, standardized pre-qualification, standardized contracts, standardized APIs, as an example, as you can see on the top, and they're easier to participate. And we've also defined a set of outcomes of how we are going to measure success. So in terms of standardized products, we want to be in a position that 80% of the flexibility procurement that is done by the distribution companies by December 2023 is done in those exact same common products. And the reason that we are doing that is we had a lot of feedback about flexibility products having diverged from the original definitions, or perhaps the definitions not have been as exact as they could have been at the beginning of the process. So what we're trying to do, again, is to converge back to a set of common products, to a set of common products. The same with pre-qualification. We had a lot of feedback that the pre-qualification experience is different across networks. So we are looking to make sure that it's not just the guidance and recommendation of what DPS and PQQ, which kind of is the procurement acronyms for those processes are, but they are common. The same with terms and conditions. We've worked over the last 3 years on the common contract, again, going back and making sure that terms and conditions and schedule headings are applied. And again, the same with making sure that we have a common dispatch specification API by the end of the year that is adopted by the network companies. So that's how we've structured the program. There is a detailed definition of the activities in the orange boxes. We have, in many cases, we have innovated. We've listened to our customers as independent companies. We've listened to customer feedback, customer ideas. We've innovated, and as a result, perhaps the experience is not as unified in certain areas. And my personal view is that that has been necessary in order to be able to move things forward. The distribution flexibility markets have been around now for 4 or 5 years, but certainly, it's a new idea. We're breaking new ground, and there isn't really a rule book that we can follow from elsewhere across the world. UK is widely recognized as being the leader in this area. So it's an area of a continuous evolution. It's an area of a continuous innovation. But at the same time, we recognize that standardization of these reduces the cost to serve, reduce the barriers to entry. So we're trying to balance the two. So looking down at improved transparency, we're picking up things around the common evaluation methodology, making sure it's fit for ED2 and it's applied in all and referenced in all of our flexibility reporting statements. We've just finished a bulk of work around curtailment data, curtailment reporting, and making sure that this is implemented throughout 2023 and being able to demonstrate that by the end of the year. Carbon reporting, we've done initial work, and actually all DNOs flexibility reporting statements that are submitted to Ofgem every April of each year, they do include carbon reporting, but we had feedback in terms of introducing more granularity and recognizing some of the more detail and more nuances around carbon reporting, especially with regards to batteries. So all of that stuff is into the program for this year, and that we'll use the methodology that we have for this year, and we'll develop the methodology for next year. And the same with NDP and coordination register. We had feedback that things like transmission constraints are shown on GSPs, and that's incorporated. There is a detailed document, and if someone from ENA can put it on the chat, there's a detailed document that sets out what each of those orange boxes is going to do over the year and the dates. Thank you, Avi. And then finally, on improved coordination, we have been doing a whole lot of work around DR visibility and operational data sharing. And again, we've set out certain outcomes around using the consistent DR visibility specifications and harmonizing the operational data sharing by certain dates. And in terms of the primacy rules, and I think there was a question there about the primacy rules, we are implementing the primacy rules. The primacy rules are going to evolve over time, but there's a first set of use cases that will be implemented, and it will be the rules are being agreed and we'll start implementing from April this year, in line with smart systems and flexibility plan commitment. Okay, so that was an overview of the program. There's more detail and there's a few questions, so we'll come back to that. But I think at this stage, I would like to hand over to Maxine to give us the challenge group perspective.
Thanks, Sotiris. So for those who don't know me, Maxine Frerk, I was previously at Ofgem a while ago now, led on ED1, senior partner for networks, but I've been independent now for a number of years, working, some work back into Ofgem, some work with the companies, and also working with the charity Sustainability First. So very much independent, but also well plugged into all of the ongoing debates. So hopefully able to bring to this the new body what it was that Sotiris and others were looking for. So the next slide summarizes who's on the challenge group. It's a rather small font on the actual list of the members. But as Sotiris said, we've got 20 experts that cover flexibility providers, whether that's traditional energy suppliers, distributed generators, community energy providers, and others. But then we also have Goran Strabak as a kind of leading academic in this area. We've got Citizens Advice, Welsh Government, still trying to get Scottish Government along. Piclo is a flexibility provider, and then Alexon and Electrolink as kind of the industry, the rest of the industry that needs to join together. So a kind of really broad set of perspectives to bring into that debate. We met 5 times last year, really scrutinising the individual projects, how they were progressing, and kind of making sure that they were heading in the right direction. But probably almost the biggest influence at the end of the year, kind of trying to engage at a more strategic level around the scope of work for this coming year, which is obviously what we're here to talk about today. But throughout, I think a credit both to Open Networks and to the great group that I've got, a really good set of constructive meetings. So next slide is just trying to sort of summarize what we were asking for at the end of last year. And hopefully you'll be able to see in our list of asks that actually, one of those things, I felt like I was heard. What Sotiris has just talked about is absolutely responding to what the challenge group were saying they felt needed to happen when we had that strategic discussion around 2023. So first point about urgency and pace builds on Andrew's comment about the fact that we really need flexibility is going to become increasingly important going forwards, and so that Open Networks program needs to respond and help support that. We talked a lot about a focus on outcomes rather than on outputs, so not just about delivering reports and frameworks and recommendations, but actually seeing a difference in the ground in what the networks were doing, and you've seen that reflected in the targets that Sotiris put up. We had a discussion that took us right back and sort of said, and what do we think the overall goal of Open Networks should be? It's been around for 5 years, and sometimes you can kind of almost take these things for granted. So we pushed Open Networks to say, what were they really here and trying to deliver? And kind of between us, I think we boiled that down to being about increasing the number of flexibility providers and the total amount of flexibility provided at the local distribution network level. But that still needs to join up with the actions that the ESO is taking already, and to make sure that we're in doing more at a local level, we're not causing any problems at the national level, and that it's the synergies are there. And I think that articulation of that goal then said, in the way that you would do, what do you need to do to achieve that goal, is really about addressing the barriers that flexibility providers face as they look to offer services in the market. And a big theme of that being about more standardized processes to make life as easy as possible for the flexibility providers who don't want to have to deal in 6 different ways with 6 different DNOs. But again, reflecting the point that Sotiris made, we were very clear that consistency mustn't mean just going at the pace of the slowest. So in some sense, there's a role for the Open Networks in getting that, got to get that balance right, but also perhaps a bit of trying to pull along the laggards and make sure that they keep up, rather than simply putting recommendations out there and leaving it to people to deliver. And we talked as an example of that about kind of contracts, for example. You give standard terminology and a framework, and you can find that each individual organisation's legal team wants to do it always in a slightly different way. Now, sometimes there can be good reasons for that, but in the most part, it's obviously just it's a little bit sometimes of everybody wanting to do things the way that they think is best, whereas actually on many of those things, you know, there's a real benefit to everybody in doing it in a harmonized way. And that sounds really easy, but actually is really hard. And so that quote at the bottom is about saying, you know, we do actually understand that dragging the companies over that next final line is the hard bit, but that we do want to see the open networks kind of pushing forward some of those things that sound simple, but we do acknowledge are hard to deliver. And you know, again, you know, that is reflected in those outcome metrics that Satiris talked about, of actually seeing change on the ground in what the DNOs are doing, not just a set of reports and recommendations. So really welcome what's been put forward, and look forward to kind of continuing to provide that support and challenge through 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. And just to echo your point, in terms of the outcomes, it's the first year that we have this clear outcome metrics, and it's in direct response to the feedback we received. You know, we shouldn't take them for granted because we didn't have them in the plan for the last 5 years. So thank you for your input. Okay, so let's move on to Avi, and Avi, you're going to cover governance. Over to you.
Thanks, Satiris. Just as Maxine and Satiris mentioned, that this year's plan is really ambitious in terms of what we're trying to deliver, the key outcomes that Satiris articulated. And it became very clear quite early that we need to reflect on the governance of the overall program as well to order to ensure that we deliver those outcomes in the timeline that we've set out. And as a reflection, we had obviously 5 years wealth of experience of having delivered this program in the past. So we took an approach of reflecting on what needs to continue, what needs to stop, and not fit for purpose, and what new things we need to do. I think over the next couple of slides, what I'm trying to do is try to articulate how we've structured the governance of the program for 2023 and going forward. Next slide, please. For those who are familiar with open networks, you'll see some element of similarity from the past, but there are also a few structural changes that we've brought on this year, which I'll probably articulate in the next few minutes. Taking you down the chart, so we have the ENA board and the Energy Networks Futures Group, that is the strategic group that holds the funding for the program, that kind of comes top down in terms of what we're doing. And this is the place where we discuss some of the recommendations of the challenge group in the past to get a sign off on all the content of the program this year. So this support we are getting is from top down. And then the steering group, the Open Network Steering Group, is the heart of the program that holds the responsibility for delivering this program in terms of time, quality, and cost. So this steering group is a group of senior members from across the network companies. Each of them, one individual per company, sits on there along with Maxine and Bays, who sit there as well, who share a chair on the steering group as well. So this is where the key sign off and the outcomes are deliberated, and we are actually essentially passed on to the wider the industry. But down below there, I suppose, is where the body of the program that has seen a lot of change this year. I think the biggest of change that you would likely to see there is a set of new work streams. So for those who are not familiar with open networks, work streams are like key topical areas or subject areas that are split out under the Open Network Steering Group. And each of these work streams then overlook or oversee certain areas of work that is going to be on the detailed technical side of things. So we have 3 new work streams this year that are aligned with the DSO functions as defined by Ofgem. And this brings a cohesion in terms of the way we message and the way we work as well in terms of network resources and the regulatory reporting and processes. Because if it's consistent, I think we all need to come together. And one thing that's been quite clear to us from our feedback from the stakeholders is, in order to deliver the outcome of open networks, which is to improve flexibility, participation, and volume, it is clear that we need to come together as an industry and not work in isolation. So that is something that we're looking to consolidate as a wider industry as well. So beneath these work streams, what you'll see are the technical working groups. So these constitute the areas that Sotiris mentioned. So for example, like standardizing APIs. So each of them require certain expertise and certain level of traction for all of them. And these groups are also represented by all the network company members. So each of the blue boxes you see on the screen have representation across all the network company members as well. So that is something that continues to be there, and we're looking to have that level of sufficient level of engagement to get these key activities on board. Suppose some of the activities that cannot necessarily be captured in this one slide is certain element of agility we are trying to maintain this year. And also the fact that what we're trying to deliver sometimes is perhaps requires senior management level sign off. So this year we also introduced something called a sponsorship. So each steering group member is going to be sponsoring one of the technical working groups. This allows for a quick and an efficient route of escalation and the senior level input as and when necessary. Because if you're going to be bringing about a systemic change in terms of consistent user experience across all network companies, this goes well beyond setting out and drafting a report that we need to do in a certain way. So that is something that is going to be embedded within the governance this year. And we also retained some of the elements of last year, which worked really well. I guess case in point challenge group. So you might see that has two color tone. The orange color tone is meant to represent stakeholder groups that are non-networks, but I think the role and remit of challenge group is framed such that they have a key important role in shaping the outcomes and proposals of the program. So they have that, although they're a non-network stakeholder body, they have a key role in shaping the program, which I'm hoping that 2023's plan is a quite clear representation of that. So they will continue to engage with Maxine being an active part of the steering group. And then we have the Insights Forum, which is a forum for broader engagement. Considering that this program and this area of work is quite world leading, like Sotis rightly pointed out, I think they have quite a lot of international panelists and international stakeholders, subject matter experts trying to engage with us, trying to understand our experience, and sometimes even passing some of their experience and learning onto us as well. So that is a forum that we will continue this year. I think the bottom of that chart, you'll see a focus group. That is something that we are also introducing this year. This is a outcome of some of the reflection we've had over the few years, that how do we get subject matter experts talk about those key areas of their expertise and feed into our work. This could be academics or some probably even members of challenge group, because challenge group, although do convene every 2 months, there is a limitation of time, and probably even if you convene half a day, to talk about the detailed nuances of across all the technical working group can be quite challenging. So we have come up with the view of convening these focus group at opportune times, which according to the right milestones of the program, we can seek inputs and get those levels of expert inputs onto them as well. This focus group will also include engagement with innovation projects and trials. There are a lot of innovation projects that are out there currently in the industry that are being progressed and which have a direct or indirect correlation with what we are doing. So I think there's certainly an opportunity for us to learn and perhaps share some learning with their trials as well. We have made good progress in the past year, but this year we are going to be identifying all for all the technical working groups. We'll try and identify the innovation projects that are relevant to this and bring them, have a conversation, and that's the platform to do it, is the focus group. I've called out the off-chain base separately because whilst we are currently delivering from a network company perspective, it is very important cog in the wheel to bring in the policy and the regulatory aspect of it. I think so. We have off-chain base feeding into our work, like in complete earnest as in the past as well, with the base continue to sit on the steering group. I think last but not least, the wider ENA working groups. So like Sotiris mentioned, we have a consolidation of some of the work in response to all the challenges we're facing, like the connections group, for instance. And I saw a comment on the chat recently about why what is done and how we're going to go about managing it. I think in the past we took out some elements of connection within open networks, and I think as an industry it's quite important to bring it all together. So that group has been envisioned to bring that all together such that we can collectively address some of the key challenges that are currently the industry is facing. So we'll continue to engage with the wider ENA groups, I guess case in points, connections, or the data and digitalization steering group, for instance, and that they will feed in at whatever level necessary, because some of them are on a more technical working group level in terms of data and how do you manage and exchange information possibly, or something that's more technology specific like EVs and in heat pumps, we go to the LCT working groups. So that will continue to be feeding into the program as a whole, and hopefully this sense of cohesion that we are looking to achieve in the industry will something that we will be trying to push through in our program as well. So in the next slide, I have kind of put down words, whatever I've just articulated for somebody who's not necessarily familiar with open networks, and some of those names might sound like a jargon. So I think I leave it at that and not necessarily go through it in greater detail again. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them on. Otherwise, I'll just pass back to Sotiris for this time. Over to Sotiris.
Thank you, Avi. Okay, so we thought we would just conclude the presentations that we had, and just on time, actually. And we have now about 15 minutes for questions. There are some questions in the chat, so I'll start from those. But please, at the same time, I think you can unmute yourself. So if you want to come in, just raise your hand and feel free to answer the question directly, or do put it in the chat. So let me start, I think, from the top. So I think there's a couple of questions with regards to the strategic connections group. So just to give you a little bit of I think a little bit of a history. So the strategic connections group was put together I think about September last year in response to a request from Ofgem and BEIS really to kind of pull together the network companies and look at how we can accelerate grid connections in relation in particular to the areas where we have transmission constraints. And kind of the first case study was West London. That was the main focus of the group on the last quarter of last year. And now out of that work that was done for West London, there is further areas of work that are going to be taken forward. Stakeholder engagement is one of the things that is currently being worked on. So I think they're going to be making some, I think, more public statements in terms of stakeholder engagement and program of work. So Helen, there's more to come, and there is also live discussions and ongoing discussions with the ESO Connections reform group in terms of how do these pieces of work tie up together. So I think there's going to be more on that. There's a question: where does that sit in the structure? It wouldn't sit in the structure that Avi presented because it's not part of the open network structure, if you like. I believe the strategic connections group sits under the ENA board at ENA, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's correct, Sotiris.
Thank you.
I think it's fair to say, Helen obviously is part of the challenge group, and we have had the comment that the open networks is one of the only very open bits of the ENA, and that some of these other considerations like connections are also important. If we want to get flexibility providers on board, we've got to get connections right. So I think it's trying to make sure we're not eating the elephant all at once, but I will be having those conversations as well, even if it's not part of the main Open Networks Challenge group.
Thank you, Maxine. And absolutely, I think the connections, the strategic connections work had to do a bit of work, a bit of scoping work, firstly, before it's able to, take something material out to stakeholders. And I think that they are now reaching at that point that they can have the stakeholder discussions. So there's going to be much more of that coming. There's a question around, Avi, I'll ask you to take on primacy rules.
Yes.
Primacy rules be clear between the DNO and ESO products from Mel? Yeah,
thanks, Mel. The short answer is yes. So we've gone on a detailed exercise of prioritizing which of the use cases that we will take on board, and the ambition is to deliver rules for the first iteration, which identifies certain use cases that are specific. So if you were to look at the detailed deliverable of that program, and you'll see those specific use cases that we're looking to pick up there. And some of them are across ESO and DSO and are unique to those them. So across the board, we'll have a lot of permutation combination. We are going away in an iterative process so that we can, each time learn from those iterations so that we can accelerate on each step, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Avi. And the question, how do you involve the IDNOs? Do you want to talk about that? IDNO presence in the project?
Yes, so I can answer that as well, Sotiris. So at the moment, IDNOs, as a head of Open Networks, I engage with ENA to go away and present to them some of the areas that we are working on. So that's a specific agenda item on the meeting there. We also tend to reach out to them ad hoc basis if there's some specific element of work that is going to be of direct influence to them. And obviously with our stakeholder engagements like the Insights Forum, they're always welcome to join. We're also in conversation to see how if we can further that engagement. But at this time, we seek to ensure that most of our outcomes and our dependencies are captured and communicated to them.
Okay, and we've got and I think the other bit about ENA is that we have specific IDNOs that participate in ENA programs such as GTC. So
GTC is a member of ENA and they do they are part of the program as well, specific. But although the caveat is that they don't necessarily represent all IDNOs, but they do bring in the IDNO perspective onto the table, and that's always a key point of discussion.
Absolutely. Angela Love, is there a program plan underpinning this detail, and can it be shared? So this that's the link that Avi put in terms of the project program plan. What work that's covered, processes and IT, not so much, because in terms of processes and IT, the question is back to the individual companies. A lot of them have different processes and IT systems in terms of what changes in process and IT you need to do in order to be able to implement that. There are products, and the primacy, the conflict the conflicts management product, which we are working jointly between DNOs and ESO, it will probably highlight for some of the more complex use cases, the need for IT industry level changes. And I think we will deal with that once we get there, but we're not there yet. In terms of there's a comment, Avi, around DR visibility specifications.
Yes.
And do you want to just say a minute on what we've done on DR visibility over 2022, just as context?
Yes. So I think this is a good opportunity to flag that. I think in the past 2021, we had the same title, but the work and the remit was slightly different than what we have now, and that's important to distinguish. In the past, the work we have done was we did a detailed analysis to see what would be the cost and benefit of making DERs that are already connected onto the network, make them visible. So that is the retrospective exercise to see, suppose there are 100 units there, what would be the break-even point to go away and invest some money to make them visible. This work was kicked off in light of the 2019 blackout, and this is one of the activities that we fed to Ofgem to go away and develop policies around that, and that was well received by Ofgem. So while we did that piece of work, we kept the work very limited to an exercise wherein the DERs exist and what should DNOs do. So this year and some element of last year was how do we harmonize the information that we get from DERs so that we have a more robust forecasting or more robust faith in the data we are receiving, and it's more consistent. So last year the working group have come up with a recommendation what the consistent information that we're seeking from DR could look like. And this year you're going away and taking a look at whether that is feasible to be done in the way and the scale we intend to do. And also, if we want to do that, what governance, like it may be code mods or what other activities we need to initiate in order to make that happen. And that's the key area of work this year.
Thanks, Avi. And the question around peer-to-peer energy trading from a networks perspective.
This is on the radar, and we are trying to engage that from a innovation project perspective. So the some elements of work in the space of electricity, like secondary trading and peer-to-peer, are at a stage that are like it's on the cusp and on the horizon. So what we're looking to do is trying to engage them through the focus group on this instance, and then bring that on board. And if it's all deemed as mature, and at the moment we need to bring it onto the program, we will look to do that as appropriate. Because one of the things we are trying to do this year is remain agile to the developments of policies and the state of the industry. So if it is deemed urgent enough to be picked up, we will. But otherwise, we'll continue to monitor via our focus groups and our general exercise to see how we can progress that. But in any case, the feedback is also from the innovation projects to give us those kind of key steers that what the current state of the industry is. So we'll look to incorporate that in our vision for the next year as well.
Okay, thank you, Avi. And there is a question in terms of when do you see the potential flexibility moving through to changes to the DNO design standards for new investment to realize the cost savings to consumers? So, Nicola, I'm not sure I've got this right, but one of the areas we've worked on is the common evaluation methodology, which is essentially the cost benefit analysis that we use to compare the new investment to flexibility services, flexibility alternatives, and we've developed this kind of common standard of assessing all investments and how economically efficient is the flexibility alternative. If the flexibility alternative is economically efficient, then we take that forward instead of the investment. So we are seeing that has already moved into the DNOs. The DNOs are already doing that through their kind of flexibility procurement rounds every or twice a year, and we are already passing benefits to consumers. All DNOs have committed to different levels of benefits as part of the new price control that's about to start in 2023, and it's also the benefits is a big part of the DSO incentive, which is part of the new regulatory framework and can lead to either rewards or penalties for those DNOs that don't seem to be passing on those savings or achieving those savings. So that's already happening. Will this project result, so from Alex, will this project result in harmonized curtailment assessment technique across all DNOs? Avi?
Thanks, Alex. I think I'll take a step back. I suppose we will not be looking to harmonize assessment techniques. What we are looking to do is share consistent curtailment information so that individual, I guess, flexible connection assets can go away and use their own analytics to come up with a more robust analysis if they see appropriate. Because I think techniques would be geographic and specific to network companies and their appetites for risk. So it's not something we are not looking to harmonize it at this stage. And also that with the SCR on the cusp, I think there's a fair element of policy directive that we are looking forward to as well.
Thank you. And exactly as you said, with the changes, there's a whole piece of work around a new methodology that's being introduced. Okay, I think we have now reached the end of our time. There's a couple of questions. One was on power quality, and there's one now on optimal power flows. We'll take an action to get back to you on this from the ENA team in writing, if that's okay. At this stage, I'd like to thank Andrew, Maxine, and Avi for joining me at the webinar today. And I would like to thank you all very, very much for taking the time to join us. If there are any follow-up questions, please reach out to Avi, myself, or the ENA team at opennetworks@energynetworks.org. Thank you all very much. Cheers.
Thanks.